Welcome back to the Mark of Kree. Our nemesis has rolled out the red carpet for us, but Rao has seethed for long enough that seeing all these corpses is merely an appetizer for the havoc we're about to wreak on his army. Our first foes have reared their ugly heads. They're going to attempt the hopeless tactic of intimidation, so we're just going to ignore them.
The first should be spoke backwards. The second spat with scorn. The third one should be chanted. The fourth, a last born. The fifth sign should be offered. The sixth used as fuel. The last one still living. Her soul his dark tool.
Now we know the actual mechanics of the Mark of Kree. Probably be better off not knowing the terrible fate that has befallen Tati. The enemies who did approach the ledge there can be sniped with the bow and arrow. But of course I have a much more expedient and satisfying plan for them. Starting things off with a health upgrade. It's because this level is extremely difficult despite the access to our new ultimate weapon, which is very effective. The thing about the axe is, very rarely does it kill enemies by depleting their health. For the most part, it's just going to rip them to pieces every time it strikes them. The axe is the only weapon in the game that doesn't actually impale opponents. Rash still has no problem putting it through people's torsos, though. Here are the guards we saw when we first entered. Got them nicely grouped around. I'm willing to risk a few hits to take out a large group at once. I'm interested in seeing what the combos look like. There's a good one now. Just so happens that all of the Axis combos are our challenges for this level, and there are further challenges as well. You may notice that with the axe we can target up to 3 enemies per button input, for a total of 9 enemies that we can target at once. Didn't really come into play when we were using the Taiaha, but the main purpose for targeting multiple enemies on the same button is that after you've killed one of the enemies, you get to continue pressing that button without having to retarget again. Basically removes a penalty for killing people that we didn't really know we had. The axe is the first weapon we've had that kills fast enough for this to actually be of use. That said, another aspect of putting multiple enemies on the same button is that after a couple of seconds, the redundant enemies sort of lose their target. So you have to kill very, very quickly to make any use of it whatsoever. Again, not going to be a huge problem. Of course, walls are proving to be more of a problem than they have been in the past. The axe does have a huge amount of range. But if you can find a nice open field, you just get to dominate. Some axe-wielding zombies. Performing Usu Fahu with the axe is obscenely difficult. I am unlikely to use Fua Usu Fahu again, simply because most of the time the inputs don't even work. Usually just accidentally do an Usu Rutu, which is more useful anyway. These axe wielders prove to be about as challenging as any of the other opponents. Our own axe proving to be the great equalizer. All enemy types are exactly the same in its wake. Of course, we are about to come across a small exception to that rule. Archers, of course. There's the archer now. They are effectively the only reason to sheathe the axe during this entire level. Though we will be bereft of choice in the matter at some point. Armor doesn't exactly hold up very well against it, although it does slow me down slightly. Just a celebratory dance for committing that murder. Toko Fahu is much easier to perform than Usu is, but not very useful. Just an incredibly elaborate spinning attack. No enemy is going to survive enough hits to actually be struck by the spinning part of that attack, though. So we got all the combo challenges. Now we just need to commit about 130 more murders for the rest of the challenges. Of course, we can do multiple dismemberments on the same enemy. So not quite 130, but there will be plenty of killing. Most of them are going to happen automatically as we hack the zombies to pieces. Torsos and legs in particular just come apart like they're made of paper mache. Really, I find it's the heads that are hard to remove. got a method for removing the heads. Oh, that was an accidentally phenomenal use of Toko Fahu. Okay, so my primary tactic for headhunting. It involves singling out an enemy, getting as close to them as possible so that Rao doesn't do any of his spinning attacks, which are often instantly lethal, and just pawing at them as lightly as I can, repeatedly doing the first attack of the combo. That will eventually get them into red health. At that point, you need to just do that first attack over and over again because it's perfectly at neck height. It guarantees a decapitation on an enemy in red health. The sword enemies are by far the most compliant at getting into red health and then allowing you to strike them in the neck. Usually, Taiaha enemies do not go down in a single strike. There was one of our dismemberment challenges already. That was removing 20 legs. We must honor the great Baomusu by building a monument of hacked corpses. Now we're completely surrounded by Taiaha wielders. Not a good state to be in, even with an axe. Somehow they can almost always block our axe strikes. Most attacks that would be instantly lethal to any other enemy will instead knock a Taiaha wielder back a couple of steps, make them drop their weapon for a second, and leave them vulnerable to actual kills. This is actually true of all the enemy types here. Just the Taiaha wielders seem to be much better at it than anyone else. The Toko Rutu combo is designed for decapitation, since the final strike is guaranteed to cut off the enemy's head if it hits them. However, the preceding strikes are so powerful that they usually will split the enemy into pieces long before their head comes off. We'll face exactly one type of enemy here, for which that is not the case. There he is now in the back. The armored axe wielders. We'll learn pretty quickly that enemies cannot be dismembered while they're wearing armor, so we do have to smash that off of them. Although if we do hit an enemy with that final hit of the Toko Rutu, they will be decapitated, regardless of armor. For the most part, I'll never actually have to do the final strike of a combo. That's mostly saved for individual enemies. Getting stun locked can be a major problem once you're just getting used to the axe. Its attacks can be very slow, surprisingly slow compared to the previous weapons we've wielded. You usually want to buy yourself a good amount of space before even attempting an attack. Which is where the axe's massive amount of range comes into play. Even though buying yourself some space is an essential part of the strategy here, you don't really want to scare enemies, which the zombies are resistant to fear, but they will still occasionally back away from you. While they're backing away, they usually will step just out of range of all your strikes, because they're just slow enough to miss them as they're backing away. With all its drawbacks, though, the axe is still a million times better than any other weapon in almost any other game. We've only just begun to see the devastation it can wreak. Oh yeah, that challenge we rushed past was 10 ground impales, as they are still called despite not involving any impalement. We are overlooking a small group of very powerful enemies. Let's put on a show for them. Here's an example of the Rahtutusai simply not hitting its mark. That's how it's supposed to work. Looks like the show's over, and we actually have a perch for Kuzo. Haven't seen one of those for a while. And it is very wise to use it, because it warns us a large group of armored axe wielders and an archer. If we follow our bloodlust and dive in blindly, we will be under archer fire for the rest of this area. And it's always good to know when there are axemen around. Usually the archer will spot you when you walk up to that grating, but not this time. And at this point, the enemies are split up. They can't climb up to get us. Already we've accomplished our challenge to bisect 60 torsos. This is a pretty long level, and ultimately 60 is going to be a drop in the bucket. Matter of fact, we've only got one challenge remaining, and that's the 40 heads. One less now. Still going to take a bit of a while to get the rest of that challenge, but we'll get there. There's another level cleared out. Onto the waiting axe wielders. This leg of the fight is a bit more difficult than the last, but I do prefer it to fighting these spearmen. Axe wielders are a fair bit more aggressive. And they do not have the speed advantage that the Taiha wielders do. So you get to make full use of your entire moveset. Believe that's sufficient carnage for the moment. We shall take a short rest before we seek more slaughter.